I'll give you a little bit of background on HVADC. We were started in 2007 to foster the growth and development of agriculture in the Hudson Valley with the intention of raising awareness of the significant contribution ag makes to the local economy. We wanted to bring attention to the development needs of farm and food businesses and to get access to traditional economic and business development tools and money that other industries have long benefited from here in New York State, as well as other areas of the country. We work on these concepts with individual businesses, and we also work from the local government level to the federal and state level. Orange County was actually one of our original participating counties early on in 2007. We're actually even fortunate to be joined by Jerry Cosgrove, who I think was also an original founding member way back when. We are now up to 8 counties. We started with 2. We work in 8 now, and that includes Sullivan, Orange, Ulster, Dutchess, Columbia, Rensselaer, Albany, and Washington counties. Along the way, we've helped more than 270 businesses with direct technical assistance, such as business planning, strategic planning, financial projections, and yes, succession planning. So we're happy you are all here tonight. More recently, HVADC has started lending money, and we are working towards closing on our 4th and 5th loans in the next few weeks, which is very exciting. But tonight, we are here to talk about succession planning. And this is a critical area of concern for the Hudson Valley, for you, the farmers on the phone tonight, your families, and future farmers who may or may not be within your family. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And we know these are not easy decisions, and we know it takes time to work through them. And hopefully we've put a panel together tonight that can help you get some ideas on how to get started, some things to think about, and then we're going to hopefully provide you some resources to get you going. We've scheduled this for 2 hours. We have a great panel of speakers, very knowledgeable folks, and we'll take some questions and answers at the end. Today, you should have also received, or yesterday or today, an email that had some handouts that goes along with the presentations tonight, and the folks who sent them along will talk about them. I think I'm going to give Avalon another second or two to see if she can get the other.
Marianne, you should have Jack trying to join the meeting now. I'm checking on the other ones.
And I have the Orange County Land Trust. All right, let's see. Jack is signing in. Oh, we have Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I had computer problems, so I'm using my phone instead.
Yeah. All right. Jack, can you hear us? Well, I see Jack. Hopefully Jack can hear everyone.
Go ahead, I'm on board.
All right. Well, now it's a party, Jack. Now it's a party. All right. I am going to share my screen. I hope. Here we go. Everybody sees that. And I'm just going to run through the agenda quickly so we can get on to the best part, which is our speakers. So tonight we have Mary Ulrich from Cornell Cooperative Extension. I'm sure many of you from Orange County know Mary. She's been a long-time friend of HVADC, and we're happy to have her here tonight. We have Molly Johnston-Heck from American Farmland Trust, along with Jeremy Snyder from the Orange County Land Trust, and they're going to talk a little bit about the work that American Farmland Trust is doing for regional farmland for a new generation. We have Jeff Fetter, which I'm really happy to have him here tonight. I've heard a lot about him over the years. I haven't actually met him, so it's been great to do this project. He is the president of Scalero, Feder, Grisanti, McGow, and King. It's the only name that's longer than Hudson Valley AgriBusiness. We have Jerry Cosgrove from American Farmland Trust, and we are joined by Jack Hornickel from the law school at Pace University. So this is a great lineup. I hope you guys have wonderful questions for them. And we're going to get started with Mary.
Good evening, everybody. So welcome to this talk. I think I recognize several of the attendees. And I want to say, yeah, I've worked with a lot of the folks on this panel in the past multiple times. They're all good, solid people. So just, I was asked to give sort of, what's special about Orange County. Lots of things are special about Orange County, but in terms of farm succession planning, we have some special hurdles, so to speak. The population, our proximity, our geography, our proximity to the population, whether it's Boston, DC, Philadelphia, whatever, our East Coast locale makes for some special situations, certainly for the wholesale and retail farmer. I mean, we often talk about retail, being so close to the city, but seriously, the wholesale farm, the larger scale farm being so close to all cities, a tractor trailer turnaround in one day is, we're in very much a geographic sweet spot for agriculture and marketing, but that also makes us kind of a sweet spot for housing. So the cost of land, upland, fortunately, well, the price of muck does continue to go up, but not at the rate that upland does. And so the cost of land gets prohibitive when you're competing with people who want houses. So the pressure to develop where we are is a lot. I think, we can always look at Suffolk County as kind of our big brother, but we don't quite, well, I'm not sure we want to be Suffolk County either. There's always another thing with the succession planning, because we are so populous and there's so much stuff going on here, the opportunity for families to seek out other jobs, that next generation to find another job and another career is it's a lot easier because there are a lot more opportunities right here. They're very exposed. And of course, as I mentioned, our market opportunity is a great plus to us. So we have this, pluses and minuses that make farming here great, but very expensive and often cost prohibitive for the new farmer, the farmer who wants to buy, the farmer who needs to buy out their siblings, which I'm sure the rest of the panel is we're going to touch on. I just want to throw a plug in because I'm sure some of the other panelists, Jeff particularly because of his experience with FarmNet, as a great leader for FarmNet for many years now. But FarmNet's, program through Cornell and New York State gets some federal dollars to help farmers work through these situations, both on a legal and financial, as well as a personal level. There's personal counselors offered because some of these conversations are very difficult. It might be easy to put it on paper, but it's not easy to talk about. So I want to put the plug in for them, but you'll hear about them later. And so that's what's going on with Orange County. We're good, Mary Ann?
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, you did a great job.
Oh, your audio didn't quite catch there.
I said, thanks, Mary. You did a great job, as always. Next up, we have Molly Heck from American Farmland Trust, and I'm going to share Molly's PowerPoint. I don't remember what I did with it. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. So as Marianne said, I'm Molly Johnston Heck. I'm the Farmland for a New Generation manager. My title is also very long at American Farmland Trust. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about Farmland for a New Generation and some of the tools that we have to offer that hopefully can be of use to all of you. And then I'm really excited for you all to hear from everyone else on this call who's a lot more knowledgeable than I am. So I'm excited also to hear them speak. You can go to the next slide, Marianne. So at American Farmland Trust, a piece of our mission is to keep farmers on land. And in order to keep farmers on land, we also need farmers. But New York's farmers are aging and a new generation faces significant challenges, as Marie just highlighted. On average, farmers over 65 outnumber those under 35 at a rate of 3 to 1. So there's 3 farmers over 65 for every 1 farmer under 35 in New York State, and also that ratio is the same in Orange County. So in order to help facilitate the transfer of farmland to the next generation and ensure that land remains in farming, American Farmland Trust and others created Farmland for a New Generation New York in 2018. So the program is coordinated by AFT, like I mentioned, and is in partnership with the state of New York and other agricultural organizations and extension offices and land trusts. So the aim of the program is to support farmers from all backgrounds. So we also work with new and beginning farmers looking to access land, as well as landowners, farming and non-farming landowners who want to keep their land in farming and need to figure out their future. And the program is composed of 2 main parts, which I'm going to talk about a little bit today. One is this network of regional navigator organizations, many of whom are actually on this call, that are there to support, as well as kind of a more visible and tangible tool, which is the New York Farmland Finder website. And so for our purposes today, you might use the program in a couple of different ways. We already have mentioned sort of those of you who may already have a successor identified and trying to figure out a succession plan from that perspective. You'd likely rely more heavily on the network of regional navigators, which I'll talk about in just a sec. Others who maybe don't have an identified successor, sorry, and are either looking to sell land or looking for a successor for their farm business, or just want to lease a portion of their farmland to a farmer to keep it in farming. You might also find the New York Farmland Finder website to be a useful tool. So either way, getting connected to Farmland for a New Generation might be a good idea. It's probably a good place to start. And then, like I said, you'll hear lots more details from other folks later. So regional navigator organizations, as I mentioned, you can see some of the logos here for regional navigator organizations that are based in Orange County. And you can also see the faces of many of those folks here, as well as FarmNet, who Marie just mentioned. So currently, Farmland for a New Generation supports a network of 34 organizations across the state. I've just pulled out a few here, including HVADC, Pace Law School, Orange County Land Trust, Cornell Cooperative Extension in Orange County, and FarmNet as some of the organizations that really directly serve Orange County. And let's see, so just a little bit about what some of these organizations do. So, as I mentioned, a lot of these organizations work both with beginning farmers and also with retiring farmers or landowners hoping to keep their land in farming. And they'll sort of interact with farmers and farmland owners in a variety of ways. But a couple of the things that I just want to highlight are, to review and negotiate leases, to act as a liaison for landowners to actually use the Farmland Finder website, to host workshops like this one to provide information about farmland protection. So HVADC is, providing a great example right now, about information. To present information about things like farmland protection, lease arrangements, and farm succession planning. A lot of the organizations, including AFT, also host networking events to actually facilitate direct connections between farm seekers and landowners. And I'm sure, as all the folks on this call, we also often provide referrals to other service providers like attorneys and accountants, according to whatever the landowner or farmer's needs are. So one thing that I really just want to highlight about this network of folks is that I see this as like a huge piece of the success of what we do and what's actually helpful for farmers and landowners. And one person really isn't going to be able to answer every question, right? So we have a network of folks with varying expertises. Obviously, we have some attorneys, we have extension folks, we have FarmNet, who has those consultants that can dig into financial issues as well as interpersonal issues. So I think that these transitions really require a team of people to be able to provide support in varying ways. And many of us really work together often to be able to do this work. And so just want to highlight that, that team approach is really important and really successful. You can go to the next slide. So on to our website, which I will put the website link actually in the chat right now before I forget. There you go. So this is, as I mentioned, probably like the most visible piece of our program. And as you can see, it's called NewYorkFarmlandFinder.org. You may have seen other FarmLink programs or websites around. And so this might be a really good tool, like I said, for those who don't have an identified successor or who are looking to lease a portion of their farmland to be able to find a farmer with the experience needed to be able to farm their land or take over their business. So, the main function of the site is that farm seekers and farmland owners can post profiles to contact one another in the hopes of making a match, signing a lease or creating a purchase agreement. Or alternatively, developing a relationship where a farm seeker may be able to take over management of a business operation. So on the website, just a couple things to highlight. Marian, if you scroll forward a couple times, there's a few little circles that are going to come up, I think, yeah, there you go. You can keep going 4 or 5. So beyond creating a profile for either for yourself as a farm seeker or as a farmland owner with a property available, you can also use the site to find an on-farm job, to access resources related to farmland access, transfer, conservation, lots of other things, find and attend an event like this one, and also find contact information for regional navigator organizations and also for AFT. You can go to the next slide. And so I don't have a ton of time, but I just want to really quickly talk about the Find a Farm page and the Find a Farmer page. So when you go to the website, you see all the farms that are listed on the site, and the top map shows all the farms that are listed in all of New York State. And then I also zoomed into Orange County to show the 4 that are listed in Orange County. And so if you were to post a property, this is where it would show up. And just a couple notes about the functionality of the site. In order to see contact information for the folks that are on the site, you actually need to have a profile. For landowners, it's a 2-step process to create a profile. So you start with some information just about yourself, and then you actually have to create a profile for the property itself. That then comes up here on a lovely map like this. And then once profiles are activated only after a phone intake call with one of our staff here at AFT, usually Alex Morenzi, my colleague. And then once activated, the profiles stay active for 1 year to make sure that things on the website stay relatively current, because that's a big concern for users. You can go to the next slide. And then real quick, so some of the things that you would be asked to share in your profile are these things: photos of the location itself, how many acres are available, the types of soils and soil maps if you have access to them, or we can help provide those, a description of the property's current and past use, the infrastructure available, crops or livestock permitted, tenure options, so whether the land is available for lease or sale, or you're looking for a more creative partnership agreement, and also what your sort of preferences or requirements are as a landowner. So that may be things like whether you require ag assessment, your personal preferences for what's grown or produced on the property, or the municipality's restrictions. You can go to the next slide. And so I just want to show sort of the flip side, which is the Find a Farmer page. So this is sort of what the Find a Farmer page looks like. You can see there's no map because folks are looking all over the state, and it would be impossible to show those areas. But there is a very long list of folks who are looking for farms in New York, and you can actually use the filter functions at the top there to sort through. And so I always find that the easiest thing to sort of knock down this list is to put in a county, a region and a county there to see, you know, okay, so I'm based in Orange County. I'm looking for folks who are looking in Orange County, and that'll sort of shorten that list a bit. And you can see that, you know, you can also filter by acreage, what they're hoping to produce, again, tenure options, and infrastructure and equipment needed. So again, these things sort of mirror the farmland owner profile, or the farm property profiles. And then next slide, real quick. So again, here's just what sort of the farm seeker profiles include. We try to sort of encourage farm seekers to look at these profiles as like a farm resume. So it should be a comprehensive snapshot of what their goals and experience are, including a description of their farming plans, whether they have a business plan, what their experience is, working on farms, managing operations, that kind of a thing, whether they'll qualify for an ag assessment, all sorts of things. So we encourage folks to have the most sort of robust profile possible in order to sort of catch the eye of landowners, but also, you know, if they're contacting landowners, then that landowner has the ability to go and look at their profile and say, okay, I can actually get a real snapshot of what you're looking for and whether you might be a good fit for me. So, yeah, so that's just a little bit about the website. And then I'm actually, you can go to the next slide, which is my last slide. That's all I've got. So I really hope that, you know, this really quick overview of Farmland for a New Generation was helpful, and coupled with some of the info that you'll hear later from the other presenters, you know, you'll feel better prepared for what's to come. And I also just real quick want to share, I'll put contact information in the chat as well so that it's easy to access. But I also just want to share our stories page on our website in case you're interested in kind of learning a little bit more about some of the folks that have utilized the services of the program and kind of done that. And also feel free to reach out if the website feels like a tool that would be helpful, or if you're looking for service providers to answer questions or support you along the way. I'm generally the general contact. I'm the general contact, and then Alex Morency, whose contact information I'll put here too, is really our website extraordinaire manager. So that's me. And then I think next you're going to hear from Jeremy, who is with Orange County Land Trust, who is actually a regional navigator.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeremy Schneider with the Orange County Land Trust. So as a land trust, we want to be of service to farmers that want to explore or pursue options for farmland conservation. When a farmer is looking at a potential conservation easement as a driver behind a succession plan, we'll end up working with other organizations to make it all mesh, as we've done in the past with Grow NYC and Equity Trust and Scenic Hudson as well. So as one of the regional navigators for Farmland for a New Generation, if we're contacted by a lifelong farmer or someone just getting started, we'll determine what their interests are and what their goals are, and we'll work with them or refer them to another partner organization if their goal is outside of our line of work. If there's anyone with us today that may be interested in conserving their land through, for example, the New York State Farmland Protection Implementation Grant Program, also known as FPIG, or another similar program, please give us a call. And last thing, I'd like to share with you one success story that happened a few years ago. This took place in the town of Mount Hope with Bill Topp, who the late Bill Topp, who passed away just before we were able to transfer a farm over to the farmers that he wanted to see on his land in the future. So Bill Topp, his background wasn't in agriculture per se. He had been leasing his farmland to the Southways of the Farmer's Daughter business that some of you are probably very familiar with. And they were looking to expand, but as farmers, especially young farmers with a growing family, they weren't in a position to purchase the farm outright. Bill Topp wanted to cash out and go to Florida, but also he wanted to see his farmland, state farmland. So we worked with them to submit an FPIG grant. And what this would enable is it would make the farm more affordable for the Southways to purchase. And as part of the process, the money would go to the Southways to then purchase the farm. And this happened in like bang, 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 within minutes of each other. They were able to purchase the farm. The farmland's conserved. Bill Top, again, the late Bill Top, his estate received the funds in return, since they were the successor of the land. So the land exchanged hands from the estate to the Southways, so the Southways can stay on the land and continue farming, and the farmland's conserved. So it was a success story. Again, it was kind of unfortunate, very unfortunate that Bill Top wasn't able to see it happen, but we know, this was his wish to see the farmland conserved and for his friends, the Southways, to stay on the land. So it all worked out, and we definitely wouldn't have been able to do it without the Ag and Markets grant and our partners at Scenic Hudson. It was definitely a team effort, because this was kind of a unique project for us, but we're ready to do more of them. And so I encourage anybody who's interested to reach out to me, jeremy@oclt.org, and I'd be happy to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And as a reminder, everyone should have received in their packets of information from Avalon a list of all our presenters and their contact information. So if you're madly making notes, hold on, you don't have to. But thank you both, Molly and Jeremy. So we're going to get into a little bit more of the meat of what this all means. Succession planning. We're going to have Jeff Fetter walk us through this. What happens when in the process. Jeff, I believe you're going to share your screen, correct?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint set of slides, and this is an overview. So what we want to do is we want to hit a lot of topics. We want to give you information so you can then go possibly look for details depending on what your specific needs are. So again, my name is Jeff Fetter. I'm an attorney in Syracuse with a firm of about 14 attorneys. I've practiced for many, many years in working with farm families all over the state, from the end of Long Island to Buffalo to Plattsburgh, down to Jamestown and through Pennsylvania and other states as well. And we work with our non-farm clients as well, but with our farm clients, we act in many cases like a general counsel that can respond to different needs that the farm owners may have during the life of their farm. We've got real estate people and litigation people that may be needed from time to time, even matrimonial, which farm matrimonials are very unique because of the unique nature of how a farm records are kept and its finances and the assets, and it's so diversified. So the reason I say that is that if we don't do a certain area, we can find you somebody that does in most cases, such as immigration, we farm out, environmental, and we can usually get somebody to someone. We work, it been mentioned before on the team approach, we work with clients as well as their advisors, the accountants, the farm advisors, the lenders, the other technicians that are working with the farms, because the team effort is so important. And it may seem like one person can take care of things, but they can't. So that's how we approach our working with farms, whether they're one farmer with a 40 cow dairy, which are very, very hard to find, or one with 6,000 cows, which is not uncommon these days. So in your materials, I also provided a booklet, a workbook that I update every year, and I just updated the 2022 book. One of the benefits of having a program in January is it makes you update your papers. So that's updated for 2022, and it provides a lot of detail of some of the things we're going to be talking about. And so that's in your materials. And so you recognize that there's a red barn with, I thought there were rocks out front, but apparently they're cats. And it was a former partner of mine, his farm, and I thought they were all rocks out in the front of his barn there. There's about a dozen cats there, so it could be one of the largest cat farms in central New York. So we're going to go to the PowerPoint, if I make it work, and Marianne and I practiced. So we're going to do that. You're going to give me control, right, Marianne? There we go. Let's see if I do it right this time.
You should just be able to, there you go. You don't need me.
You never know. Don't go anywhere. So we got the, okay, we're going to do a slideshow. We're going to go from beginning, and told me I got some things. So do you have a full screen picture right now of everything?
We do, Jeff. Congratulations.
All right. Okay, so, and based on the participants, I'm assuming that everyone can see the screen except for the person on the phone. Is that correct? Can everybody see the screen? Okay. If you can't see the screen, I think it's just the one on the phone. But, okay, so we're going to go through a number of different points here. I'm going to move that one over here so I can look at it. Okay, so back on slide one. So with the importance of succession planning, got to get rid of this one here. Bear with me. All right. All right, so the importance of succession planning is that what we want to do are many things. Succession planning takes on planning for the future, planning for the present, planning for the what ifs in life, trying to sell, trying to buy. There's a lot of implications in putting together a succession plan, but primarily, and one of the joys I have of working with farms is that the real desire of what I refer to as the senior generation is to perpetuate the family farm. And Marianne had mentioned earlier that talking about family and non-family, in many cases, have many farm families that because there's no longer 6 kids being born and 3 stay on the farm, but 3 are being born and all 3 are going somewhere else. We have many farms that use key employees, and we have farms that have set things up so they pretty much say, I don't care who's running the farm, whether it's my family or not, I want to be able to keep this farm going if I can. So perpetuation of the family farm is the primary important goal for most of my clients, and I think everybody that's participating here. Of course, succession planning, you also want to do in a way you minimize taxes, whether they're income taxes, estate taxes. We're not going to get deep into those taxes because you can rely on your accountants, but everything we look at has tax implications, of course, and the state tax issues have become easier to deal with over the past several years. The management of farm assets is part of succession planning, providing financial support for the senior generation as well as those that are in the next generation and dealing with farm and non-farm heirs. One thing I can share is that what I've seen change in the last 20 years primarily is that when I really started working with farms, if there were children on the farm and then there were non-farm children, the non-farm children usually said that if my brother and my sister have stayed on the farm's theirs. I've made other choices. I'm teaching somewhere, or I'm working for a government, or whatever it might be. But I'm seeing more and more that that's changing a little bit as families are changing and what's being done on farms is changing. There's a lot of non-farm heirs, nothing personal against anybody on the call. There's a lot of non-farm heirs that believe that they're entitled to share in the legacy of the farm and that they should have a stake in the action as well. And as many times as I've gone into our law library looking for the law of entitlement, I haven't been able to find it. But when there's solar projects and there's gas and there's wind and there's different type of minerals and there's different type of value added operations that people want to add on to farms today, such as wineries, distilleries, whatever it might be. It's important to really differentiate between the farm areas and the non-farm areas and how they should be treated in your planning. Asset protection is always important. If you're in the senior generation, you want to make sure that the next generation is not doing things that's going to expose you personally to a lot of financial liability. Retirement planning, as little as that word is used with farmers, farmers do partially retire. I've yet to see one who's fully retired, but that's part of the importance too. They want to be able to retire, but they want to be able to see the farm continue on, perpetuate. In some of the larger farms, if the senior generation wants to go south for several months, then come back and pretend they're the bosses again. And so you got to kind of work those things together. Long-term care planning is critically important in farms today because long-term care expenses have just skyrocketed to where they're well over $100,000, $130,000 a year for nursing home care. So preparing for long-term care is important in the planning. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to get a long-term care insurance policies these days because the insurance companies have backed off of providing them because they really were not beneficial to the insurance companies. And then you have to plan for the unplanned events such as divorce, long-term care, and having a plan. The term is succession planning, but it really is a plan. What if there's a divorce? What if there's some type of tragedy? What if there is the death of the wrong generation? You have to have that as part of your plan. And what we're going to be talking about is the importance of an estate plan together with your business plan. And primarily, you want to do all of this, especially if you're the senior generation, to maintain the family and family business harmony. So what is succession planning? It's estate and lifetime transfer planning. Think of your estate plan as something you put together and you put it in the drawer. My long-term plan is that I'm going to be transferring the farm down to Susan and Eddie, who are my kids, and I'm going to be doing it over a period of time. But what if I don't get there? What if something happens to me beforehand? I want to make sure that the plan is in place that says this is still going to take place the way that I had structured it. So the estate plan and the lifetime transfer plan work together. Using of trusts and limited liability entities for asset protection. Again, so that if somebody gets hurt on the farm, somebody gets hurt by somebody on the farm, that you don't lose the entire farm because of an injury. Management and knowledge transfer. It's easy to turn over a piece of paper and transfer your farm to the next generation, but if you've got an operating entity, you need to go through the period of time where there's knowledge transfer. Many families they're grown, raised on the farm, and so knowledge transfer becomes natural. They've been dealing with mom and dad for ever and ever, and that's their life. Management transfer is a little different. When somebody's 80 years old and they still haven't done anything for transferring, and if there are employees, there's creditors, there's bankers, there's other vendors, there's whoever you're dealing with on the outside world. If they don't know who that next generation is, it's not going to succeed when you do a succession plan, because Junior hasn't had any responsibility for dealing with management and dealing with the outside world. And so again, you're going to see this a few times. Long-term care planning issues we want to deal with through probably trust transfers or outright transfers or sales. And like I said before, planning for the expected and the unexpected. And succession planning can also be a sale or other transfer, whether it's to a family or to a non-family member or members. So the way we do it, wills, trusts, gifting, which we'll talk about. What we want to talk about tonight is all the different types of ways you can consider in doing a transfer, to do a succession plan. And there are numerous ways that you could spend days going through all the options in little detail or great detail. With the long-term care planning, We want to possibly set up trusts. We want to possibly doing gifting, long-term care insurance. As many of you may know that if I have assets and I go into a nursing home, I'm not going to qualify for Medicaid if I have over $14,000 in assets. I'm going to have to spend down to $14,000, which is pretty much going to wipe out any opportunity to keep my farm assets. If I'm in a married couple and one of us is in the nursing home and the other is home or in the community, it's about $100,000 that I can keep, including my home, personal living types of items, furniture, etc., car, and approximately $100,000 of investment assets that I can keep. But if I don't have those, I'm down to $14,000 and going into a nursing home. So with part of long-term care planning, if long-term care insurance is not available, it's creating trusts or transferring the assets out of my name. And certain trusts work, certain trusts don't work, but they start a 5-year clock. It's called a look-back period. It used to be 3 years. But if I give away assets and if I go into a nursing home on the 6th year, they can't come back after the assets that I've given away. Even if I put them into trust, I set up a trust for the benefit of my family to transition the farm, and then I just go on upon my life, and 5 years goes by pretty quickly, and those assets are protected from a Medicaid and long-term care exposure. If I need nursing home care before the 5 years, let's say I make it 4 years, that doesn't mean the whole plan has failed. What it means is that my family has to find a way to private pay for that last year so we can get past that 5-year limit. And there's different strategies that can be used depending on the assets, whether it's farm assets or IRAs or investments. But it really is it's almost the estate tax of the 21st century, the costs of going to long-term care because people are living longer. So then we plan through agreements, lots of agreements, whether they're lease agreements between somebody who's leasing the farm, whether I have a partner and I want to make sure we've got everything set. If he dies or I die, who's buying out who. And again, establishing relationships with key employees who may become the next generation with my family or without my family. And again, we create entities for all of this, and then matrimonial planning. Prenuptial agreements used to be years and years ago for when somebody was married for the second time and she's got children, I've got children, we want to plan for making sure that we take care of our own children. But today, with the divorce rates and the issues that raised, there's a lot of prenuptial agreements that are going into farm relationships, because I want to make sure that my partner, that she gets into a divorce, that her divorce doesn't affect our farm, and vice versa. So prenuptial agreements, and sometimes even in the agreements within the entity, there's provisions that say that a prenuptial agreement needs to be required. That's not always easy to get. And if you think prenuptial agreements are tough, you should try a postnuptial agreement, which means after you're married, you go to your spouse and you say, honey, I got this agreement I want you to sign. And, they pretty much say, well, forget that, I'm not signing it. So it all does come together as one plan. Everything we've talked about, and somewhere in the middle there is the perfect spot. We've got the estate, retirement, financial planning to make sure the senior generation is set. We've got long-term care planning over on the left. If there's more than one owner, whether they're siblings or non-siblings, buy-sell agreements, we want to make sure we have the management succession and the asset protection planning. Now the challenges are, when we have a senior generation, what are they concerned about? They want retirement income. They want security for their surviving spouse if they pass away. The primary interest they have is the perpetuation of the family farm to keep it going. They want to make sure they're treating their farm and their non-farm heirs equitably, which isn't always equal. There's an old saying, equal is not always fair and fair is not always equal, but those that have stayed on the farm and have made a lot of sacrifices and have enjoyed that life, it's not necessarily true that they share equally with their non-farm their non-farm siblings who may have huge pensions or have gone on to life and done very well on their own. And the big two, estate taxes and income taxes. I haven't met a farmer yet who wants to pay any taxes, but they do come up periodically. And then when we get to the junior generation, if we're talking about within a family, what do they want? They want ownership. They want to own this operation. But we want to do it in a way that makes sense for them and for the senior generation, both from being able to run the farm and also tax issues that may arise. We'll get into that. They want credibility in the community. They want credibility with the lenders. They want to be able to now making their own reputations out there. They want to take over management responsibilities. They want to make sure that those continuing needs of the senior generation don't affect their ability to have the ability to manage the farm operations. They want to make sure their siblings aren't necessarily involved in the day-to-day operations. That can always also be a problem if you've got different siblings and you have to track down a sibling to start making decisions or dealing with the bank. We had one client that, a few clients that thought the best way to do a succession plan was to divide the farm up into 5 farms and then give each child one of the farms. Well, that works great during the first generation because you got the one family that's running the farm and leasing from his or her siblings. But now that operating generation wants to sell, and these other siblings don't necessarily want to lease to those outside people that want to buy the operation. And the outside people don't want to buy the operation if they don't have any assurance that they're going to have the land. So you really have to make a plan that makes practical sense above the emotional impact. And you can deal with non-farm heirs in different ways, which we'll talk about: life insurance, other financial assets, whatever it may be. So the tools for estate transfer planning, let's go right down to the bottom on this one. There's lots of tools for estate planning. You have wills. What happens if I die? You have trusts. A lot of people are concerned about trust because they're intimidating. Everybody has a story about the trust that didn't work or the trust that they couldn't get anything out of. Trust can be built up in a way that they're very flexible to deal with, and they're even changeable. As we'll talk about, even an irrevocable trust can be changed. It can't be going back to the person who created it, but you can make modifications as time goes on, depending on the trust. So trusts have many purposes. They minimize estate taxes, asset protection. If I put assets, let's put it this way, if Dad puts assets into a trust on Monday and runs into a school bus on Tuesday, those assets are protected. If Dad runs into a school bus on Monday and then he tries to put the assets into the trust on Tuesday, it doesn't work that way. Trust can also provide the equalization we've been talking about, that I have certain assets that are going to go to my farm heirs and certain assets that are going to go to my non-farm heirs. With the values of land in the Hudson Valley, I do a lot of work on Long Island as well. The significant value of these farms, in many cases, what we'll do if you've got an example where I've got 5 children, 2 stayed on the farm and 3 went off to do other things. So I want to be fair to the children. So the 2 that are on the farm, I'm providing that in the event of my death and Mom's death, that the operating entity, the operating assets will be for them. But the real estate, we're saying, is going into a trust. It's going to be a continuous trust that allows my farm heirs to be able to use the land. But if my farm heirs ever sell the land, then that may be divided among all my children. Because what I'm trying to avoid is that Mom and I die in January, and the intention is that the farm is going to continue with the farm heirs, and I've given everything to my farm heirs. And in February, the farm heirs sell everything, including this land worth millions of dollars, and the non-farm heirs are like, well, what happened there? We just lost everything. And there's lots of different ways you can set that up, but that's pretty common planning that says that if the non-farm heirs are they're beneficiaries of the land, but they don't get to control anything. And you can always talk about that with your planning people. And then the other purpose of a trust is preserving the business assets for multiple generations to follow so they don't get eaten up by matrimonial actions and estate taxes. If I put a large, valuable farm into a trust, there may never be another estate tax dollar that has to be paid on that trust, no matter how many generations it goes down. And you have many different types of trusts, which we could spend multiple days going through these, but technically they're just revocable, which means primarily I'm trying to avoid probate. And so I put these assets into trust. I can always get them back. I can always amend it. And I may be putting a property into trust for my home in Florida that I'm at in the winter. And the idea is to avoid probate down in Florida. But it provides no tax protection. It provides no creditor protection. It provides no protection from long-term care costs. It's just to avoid probate, which can be very valuable in the planning. Irrevocable trusts are permanent trusts. Permanent from the perspective that once I put it in there, I can't get it back. It's not permanent in the fact that my children can't get assets out, or we may transfer them over to a different trust, but an irrevocable trust is saying that I can't get it back. And so depending on that, I use a long-term care trust, which are called Medicaid trusts. I put the assets into a trust. I can't get them back, but maybe I can get the income from there. Medicaid says that's okay, but if Medicaid sees I can get back those assets, they can get those assets back. Or I may do more of a trust where I really cut the string from my the assets I'm putting in there. I've got a significant estate, and the state tax exemptions are high now, but when they were lower, or they may be lower in the future, I put assets into a trust that I want out of my estate. And I've got a taxable estate, so I transfer property into a trust when it's worth $1 million. And when I die, it's worth $5 million. All that appreciation is outside my estate. If I kept that $1 million property in my estate and the years go by and the value keeps going up and up, that's all going to be taxed in my estate. And I will never write an estate tax check for my own estate. My children will be writing estate tax checks. So that, again, there's different ways or different reasons to have these trusts. A living trust is just another way of saying a revocable trust. An inter vivos is another way of saying living. It's just during lifetime. And so those are the types of trusts I create now. But in my will, I can put together testamentary trusts. They don't exist. It just says in my will, in the event of my death, I want my operating farm assets to go into the trust for the benefit of my children that are actively engaged in the operation of the farm. And I want my real estate assets to go into the real estate trust for the benefit of my children. Those trusts are just sitting in my will, ready to be needed in the event of my death. As I said earlier, when we're doing long-term planning, that may be my long-term plan. I want to get everything over to the next generation, but because of tax reasons or whatever it might be, I can't do it right now. I may not even be able to do it during my lifetime. But so I have in my will these trusts that will make sure everything happens the way that I want in the event of my death. Living wills, durable powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, those are lifetime documents. I want my durable power of attorney so I can appoint my daughter to take care of things if I can't take care of them while I'm alive. My power of attorney terminates at my death. Sometimes I will get a call from somebody that says, my father passed away, but I've got his power of attorney, so I'm going to move some things around. And it's just that power of attorney terminated when dad died. The healthcare power is the document that says that you're appointing someone to make healthcare decisions on your behalf. I may appoint my wife, and I may appoint one child, then another child. In New York, you can only appoint one person at a time because they don't want to fight out in the waiting room if there's a decision that has to be made. And a living will is simply the document that expresses my wishes, doesn't appoint anybody, but says, if I'm in a terminal condition, it's irreversible, 2 physicians have said there's no chance of recovery, then I'm saying it's okay to let me go. It's for those artificial measures. And then the other tool for estate transfer planning is the life insurance policy, which can serve a lot of purposes. A young farm owner has a life insurance policy to take care of his or her spouse and kids. They may have the life insurance in place to take care of debt that's being acquired on the farm. As time goes on, the life insurance may be used so that I can acquire additional debt. And then it's to be able to buy out my partner, or my partner is able to buy me out. And then it's for purposes of paying long-term care costs if I die. And it's for purposes of paying estate taxes if I die. So a life insurance policy can serve a lot of purposes as life goes on, as you're going through the timeline of life. So let's talk about the different ways we can do this. Why use a gifting exemption? Well, first of all, we've got exemptions that are $12,060,000 each. That went up from $11,930,000 last year. And although there's talk last year that there's going to come down and you're going to cut all these gift and estate exemptions in half, they haven't done that. And this is an election year. It's probably very unlikely it's going to happen this year. But I can give up to $12 million without anybody paying a penny in taxes on it. If I use a gift tax exemption during my lifetime, then it cuts into my estate exemption at death. So if I have a 12 million exemption and I give my child a farm worth 1 million, I only have an $11 million exemption. Now these exemptions are so high, they've benefited many of the middle class farms because that has made it so it's easier to make transfers. As you'll see a little later, they've jumped from 675,000 just 20 years ago to $12 million. The annual exclusion rate, that means how much you can gift each year without any consequences, is $16,000. A lot of people get confused that they think I can only give $16,000 and people are going to have to pay taxes. Well, that's not true. I can give $16,000 to anybody I meet on the street. And I can give them cash, I can give them land, I can give them whatever it might be. But I don't have to file a gift tax return if I'm giving up to $16,000. If I gave you $116,000, 16's free, but the 100 gets chipped away at my $12 million exemption. So it's really not a problem to make large gifts of land, and you shouldn't be afraid of the $16,000 annual cap. It just went up to 16 from 15 last year. Why else use a gifting plan? Because your next generation wants to continue the business. Many farms saying, mom and dad say, I don't need this farm. I don't need the money from this farm, but I want to make sure it's around for the next generation. So maybe I do it through a gifting program rather than a purchase and sale. With a purchase and sale, somebody's paying taxes. If I sell my farm even to my daughter, I'm going to pay taxes when I sell it, and she's going to have to come out of pocket to pay for the farm. In many cases, and this is something that's part of the long-term planning, it works well to have me continue owning my farm until the time I die. Because if I bought my farm in the Hudson Valley a long time ago for $100,000 and it's worth $1 million, if I sell it today, I got it for $1 million. I have to pay taxes on the difference between $1 million and $100,000 basis. If I die owning that farm, there's a step up in basis, which means I die, my farm gets a step up in basis to $1 million. My children sell it to a third party, or maybe the person that's been using my farm, my family pays no taxes. So you have to look at the tax implications when doing not just sales of farms or purchases of farms, but also with gifting. And with this happening in the Hudson Valley, I think it was Mary Ann was talking about what's going on in Orange County. And it was happening before COVID, but with some of my farm clients in the area pre-COVID, the market was starting to slow down on new developments. And post-COVID, it's wildfire was going on outside of the large metropolitan areas. So gifting can really help the next generation. Maybe I use a trust for my gifting because I can create the lifetime trust and I can put my gift into the trust. So why do I do that? I gift it at the value I have today, and then it's protected for my next generation, so they know that as bad as I drive, they're not going to use it from a lawsuit. Or even more concerning with a lot of farms is that mom passes away and dad goes down to Florida, and dad shows up with a friend in a few years, and all of a sudden the friend and dad have married, and this farm that we've worked on for 30, 40 years is now at risk of going to an outside third party because there wasn't any planning done when they were getting married. So I use a testamentary trust. I'm not getting rid of the farm now, but I want it in my will. I want to keep the property within the family so that it doesn't go to outside parties. Again, asset protection, so that if I put it into a trust and then I get into an accident, the trust assets are protected. And maybe it's my kids I'm concerned about. I put it into I give it to my kids, and my kids run into a school bus, that farm's gone, possibly. So if I put it into a trust, and the beneficiary of the trust gets into an accident, there's no exposure. If the trust is drafted properly, you've got creditor protection that nobody can get inside that trust. And as mentioned before, I can save estate taxes for many generations. And the other thing I'm doing with my trust is I'm really establishing that legacy for the children and the grandchildren. Got farms that are already down to the, say, senior generation down to the third generation, and the middle generation just wants to keep farming but has no intention of selling either. So I create this legacy through my planning. Now, okay, so I want to sell the farm. If I sell it to family members, I want to treat them as non-family members. That's not to be harsh, but that's because we want to document everything so that it stands up. It stands up for tax purposes, and it stands up for asset protection. I want to document that sale and have security agreements in place, including a mortgage. So somebody says to me, well, I don't need a mortgage. It's my daughter and her husband that are buying this. And I say, that's fine, but if something happens and they get sued, that farm's going with the creditor. If my kids owe me money, or my non-kids, somebody else, and there's a mortgage on there, that third party can't get in there. So I'm putting mortgages on properties that are transfers between family members, because what it does is it protects the property for the family. My daughter and my son-in-law get sued. They have judgments against them. I foreclose on the mortgage. The mortgage is the property is completely protected for us to be using for the family. The third party can't get in there. Or I may do a part sale or a part gift to generate income. I'm sorry, part sale, part gift to generate income, but I don't need to sell everything. So I may just take back a partial note from my kids for something. So agreements with family members may be the sale of land, sale of the operating entity and keeping the land, or we may do both. We even do sales involving conservation easements, which Jerry's going to talk about a little bit. I may have the ability to do a conservation easement and raise $200,000. That's all I need for retirement. And so I take the $200,000 and I gift the remaining interest in the real estate down to my kids. So you can use conservation easements and PDRs, purchase of development rights, for many purposes. To non-family members, you might be buying assets, or you might be buying stock if it's an old corporation. You've got business continuation agreements, meaning the farm's going to continue on. Buy-sell agreements if I have partners, so that with my non-family member, I die, she dies, we buy each other out. And we may have key employee transactions, which we'll talk about a little bit, bringing key employees in through restricted ownership agreements, meaning that I start my key employee who I don't want to go down the road. I don't want to get wooed away. I want to put some hooks into them, a carrot and a stick that says, as longer you're here, the more you're going to earn towards ownership of this farm. And there's many ways we can do that with LLCs or partnerships. This is in my handout materials a great deal, is using profits interest. My key employee is the most valuable person I could possibly get, but doesn't have a penny to their name. So I give them a profits interest, which means they become a partner with me, but they don't have any real value yet. So they come in for free and they grow from there. We come in and I say, okay, you're going to get 40% of the future growth. I'm going to get 60. So as that farm appreciates over the next several years, that key employee is building up equity in the farm. The next year I say, you know, this is going great. I'll be 40, you be 60, and we can accelerate this transfer to bring in the key employees. And what I do with one key employee, I don't have to do with another key employee. And advice to everybody, family, non-family mostly, is don't be the bank. Banks are good at being banks. Farmers are good at being farmers. But if you're going to take back paper, and people think that they're going to save all kinds of taxes if they take back paper instead of selling all at once, which isn't necessarily true, don't be the bank. Because if I sell this farm and the farm goes belly up, all I've got is a piece of paper in this mortgage. I have to go through a legal action to foreclose on this mortgage or whatever it might be. I tell people that if you're going to take back paper, make sure you get enough upfront as a down payment to make you happy for the rest of your life. Because if somebody doesn't have skin in the game because they've had to go out and borrow from Farm Credit or from any of the other lenders, they're more likely to just throw their arms up because they can't handle the frustrations of being a farmer, as exciting as it sounded. So in the real estate, you know, if I'm transferring the farm, am I transferring the whole thing? Maybe I'm carving off a piece that's going to be for the third party or maybe for my kids, and they're going to farm, and then I'm going to keep the house. Well, I might have to do a subdivision there. I don't want to do a subdivision because I got to go through all the town council and all the approvals necessary. So what I might do is, whether it's a family member or non-family member, is say, I'll sell you the farm, but I'm keeping a life estate in the house and the surrounding residential part of it so that I can stay in the house and you can run the farm. You can do that with family or non-family members. So with selling the farm or buying the farm, there's a lot of tax implications you want to look at, which can go back to that team approach with your financial advisor, with your tax person. So now let's go on to the key employees. This is what I was talking about before. So I don't have any family members, or maybe because I don't have a large family, I've got a key employee that's as valuable as my son or daughter, and they know it, and they want to put some hooks into this person. There's lots of ways to bring in that key person. Jack Hornicle and I just did one, I think he's going to be talking about, where we had a key person that was taking over the farm operations. The non-farm family was all on board about this because they really wanted to perpetuate the farm. It was really an ideal situation. In different ways you can bring that key person in. And with the size of the farms and what's going on today, a lot of farms are now doing strategic alliances with other farms. That they share equipment, they share cropping operations, they share everything, but they're keeping their separate farms. And so over a period of time, my neighbor, maybe we may be in a joint venture of sorts, because I'm not that anxious to get rid of my farm, but that neighbor we've got agreements in place that say, almost like a buy-sell agreement where my neighbor and I are in the same farm, but this is separate farms, to say, if I pass away, then my neighbor has the option to buy a farm for my family. Now, why would I ever do that? Back to that step up in basis. My family doesn't want me to get rid of the farm while I'm living, because first, I want to keep farming, and second is there'd be lots of taxes. So Farm A and Farm B have a deal together. When Farmer B dies, Farmer A buys out the farm, and there's a step up in basis. And that could be done through agreements you put together today. So what is the way to do this? Again and again and again, it's the team effort. Whether it's the family on the same team, financial people, farm management, tax, legal expertise. Be flexible, because you have to take into consideration there could be changes. People change their mind, what they want to do, what they can do. Revisit your goals, monitor and maintain the plan. Even if it's your will, it's like a piece of equipment. You've got to maintain it and repair it periodically, because things have happened. People's plans have changed. Whatever it might be, you have to expect the unexpected in any type of planning. and be able to keep a plan, even if it's a trust, in a way that's flexible to accommodate different changes down the road. Now, I have a future transfer. Remember I told you about putting our estate planning documents in the drawer for a later time? Well, I want to review, create, or update my wills, trusts, all those healthcare documents I was talking about. Do I have distributions to spouse or children outright? Should I use a trust structure? Do I have an old will that's an I love you will that says I leave everything to my wife, she leaves everything to me, and then we divide it equally among 4 children? 2 of the children are on the farm, and they'll forever hate you for leaving them with their siblings. You want to review and update your retirement plans and life insurance. If you have IRAs or simple plans, make sure that they're used the proper way you want to provide for the spouse, to provide for yourself, and to provide for the non-farm heirs if need be. Those are called non-probate property, meaning they don't go through your will. We won't get into that, but non-probate property is anything that is by beneficiary designation. So I could say that I'm leaving my entire IRA portfolio to Mary Ann, and my beneficiary designation says it goes to Jerry. The beneficiary designation trumps the will. So you got to make sure in doing your planning that you're looking at all of your assets and how they're owned, and working with your financial advisors. Review your healthcare documents. Ensure that you've got the language that you want in your documents. You want to make sure you have financial powers, legal of attorney. Anybody in your family over 18 should have a healthcare power of attorney, whether they're in college, whether they're not in college, because mom and dad have no authority anymore. And hospitals and school health centers won't talk to you. And anybody who's involved in the farm, as little as they may be, they need to have a will. There's a whole conversation we're going to have about what happens without a will, but to keep things simple, if I've transferred things down to my daughter and my son, and my daughter has a couple kids and my son doesn't, so he never did a will, he dies, everything comes back to me. This is after all the efforts of trying to transfer it down to him. Now let's say, since I gave it away, I'm in a nursing home, my son dies, everything comes back to me. The plan has to be coordinated among the multiple generations. Okay, let's quickly look, because I've got about 5 minutes, 3 minutes. 3 minutes, Mary Ann, 5 minutes? How many? Oh, I'm sorry. How many did you?
3. I would go with 3.
3. Okay, look how the exemptions for estate and gift have gone up since 1990. New York has gone from 115 to 6 million. So don't have the concern that we've always had that everything's going to go to the government. There's New York limitations on your estate taxes, but the plan itself, the team, you got to put everybody together. You got the farm sitting at the top, the farm's the boss, and because the farm is you've created another member of the family, the farm. Working for the farm is that present owner and management team. The next generation is over there waiting to be part of it. You've got your key employees. With many operations, you just can't live without them anymore. And then you've got your advisory team, whoever they may be, as many as they may be, bring them on. Have an advisory team that works with each other, so you don't think that one person's taking control of everything, because if they can work together, they're working for you. So with saying that, that's the end of my discussion, except for one thing, which is you can't start planning too early. You got to do it now, regardless of your age. And think of the 80-year-old who tells the 60-year-old, I'm ready to turn the farm over. And the 60-year-old says, I don't want it. I'm moving to Florida. So do the planning early, and communication is king when you're putting these plans together. That's my spiel. So appreciate the time and the ability to be able to talk to all of you. I'm sorry it was a one-way conversation, but be happy to answer any questions at the end. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. That was quite a bit of information. And I just want to let everybody know that we are recording this and we will make it available, because Jeff covered many topics, and I feel like there may be a test at the end. I'm not sure. All right, so next up we have Jerry Cosgrove from American Farmland Trust, and I am going to share my screen with Jerry's presentation.
Right. Well, thanks, Jeff. And Jeff is a literal, as he just demonstrated, encyclopedia of farm transfer, farm succession issues. I'm going to drill down a little bit on the interplay between conservation easements and farm transfer. Jeff alluded to it. Probably not too far. I want to make sure I leave time for our case studies with Jack, and hopefully some time at the end for some questions and answers. As Mary Ann said at the outset, I'm Farm Legacy Director with American Farmland Trust. I also wear another hat. I'm affiliated as of counsel with Jeff's law firm. I worked with him on some projects, and particularly in ones that involve conservation easements, and have enjoyed working with them. And I'm always amazed at Jeff's ability to travel the length and breadth of New York State, working with farmers and the ag community. I'm really going to talk about conservation options, just connecting the dots really between farm transfer, estate planning, and farmland protection. I haven't got the slides up, Marianne. Have folks got the slides? Oh, okay. Well, here we go. So if you can hop to the next slide, Marianne, be great. Actually, to the next one. Going to go through the intro slides pretty quickly. Again, for folks that have worked with farmers, farming is a business, and one of the challenges with integrating conservation easements is to really integrate, the farm transfer, developing a conservation easement with the fact that farming is an ongoing business. And in most cases, one of the important goals of the family or of the transferring farmers is that the farm business continue. Next slide. I think it's also true, though, that farms are a unique asset. I mean, while often the bankers and financial folks really look at them, as a financial asset, the fact is there certainly is an intrinsic value. Obviously, working for American Farmland Trust, that's core to our mission as an organization. But I do think that that's a value set that's shared by many families. They view the land as a legacy, as something that's important, not just any old asset. It's not easy to divide land parcels, and from an agricultural perspective, it's really not advisable. So keeping the land intact is an important component of farm transfer. Next slide. Again, I mean, there is, Jeff alluded, there's several basic goals, certainly, transferring management skills, transferring assets. A lot of it goes towards ensuring financial security and peace of mind. The easement really comes in with, transferring assets and to some degree with the senior generation in particular, creating that peace of mind, knowing that their land is going to stay in agricultural production. Next slide. So the tool that we use primarily is a conservation easement. Again, I learned a long time ago, it's very important that easements need to be incorporated into the overall plan. Jeff gave you a good sense of what all the details and all the intricacies that need to be involved in a comprehensive succession plan, estate plan, and easements many times. And Jack is going to have an example of an instance, and Jeff has alluded to that as well, where easements can actually be incorporated and play a very useful role, but they've really got to be integrated with the overall plan. Pretty simple how you transfer them. They can be donated. They qualify as a charitable tax deduction, or they can be sold. We're fortunate in New York State, we have a very well-funded farmland protection program that's been in existence for 25 plus years. We now have a federal easement program known as ACEB-ALE, administered by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And in Orange County, I know that the town of Warwick has funded easements as part of a local farmland protection program as well. In terms of how you do it, they can also be incorporated into a will or trust. Some folks prefer not to make a lifetime transaction with an easement, and they can be obviously part of a will given, directions to a executor of a will or a trustee of a trust. Next slide. So for those who aren't familiar with easements, it's always helpful to review. They're a deed restriction on future uses, mainly uses that would make the land incompatible for agricultural use, as we'll see in a moment. They're voluntarily. This is something whether people are donating or selling their easements. This is a voluntary real estate transaction. They're permanent, designed to be very, very long-term per both the New York State program and the Internal Revenue Code regulations governing donations of conservation easements. They are literally held by an enforcing entity. It has to be a government or a nonprofit, such as the Orange County Land Trust or American Farmland Trust. And the holder doesn't really own any assets in the traditional sense. They are taking on an obligation to enforce in perpetuity the terms of the deed restriction. And so that's a significant difference than if they were to own the asset outright, as in that case, it might have some economic value. Property stays on the tax rolls. Generally, it's a tax wash if the land is already receiving agricultural assessment. And it can certainly be sold, leased, or otherwise transferred by gift or bequest, subject to the conservation easement deed restriction. So drilling down a little bit to agricultural easements, essentially they limit uses that are inconsistent with agricultural productivity. That is the main restriction. Again, translating as a practical matter, it means significant restrictions on subdivision and non-agricultural uses, both commercial and residential. A well-drafted easement, in my opinion, encourages and supports agricultural use. Again, we're fortunate in New York State. The New York State conservation easement template that Ag and Markets uses is quite farm friendly, provides a lot of flexibility. It also specifically supports the right to farm, which is important, particularly as farm operations expand and evolve. Importantly, and this is true with all easements, public access is not required so that the landowner reserves the traditional right to decide who can and cannot have access to the farm. And as I mentioned before, ag easements can be donated or sold, or as Jeff mentioned, they can certainly be part of a bargain sale with a partial contribution to a conservation organization with a partial payment of cash. And those transactions happen quite frequently. Next slide, Marianne. So I just want to outline sort of in the planning vein, what I see are four significant planning considerations for easements as part of a farm transfer, a farm succession plan. One is the obvious impact on the farm business. This goes to the flexibility component of the drafting, that really the future farming entities, enterprises need to be thought about into the far distant future so that the easement will provide sufficient flexibility for operational changes down the road. This also relates, Marianne, why don't you go to the next slide? I'll flip through. Sorry. So specifically, new enterprises, diversification, downsizing. So you may want to actually permit subdivision if it's anticipated that a large acreage might need to be put into separate farming units. I believe that was the case in the case study that Jack's going to discuss. The easement was actually set up so that it could be easily separated into smaller units. Future expansion, again, large structures, particularly with livestock. And I think increasingly renewable energy. We're seeing a lot of improvement on agrivoltaics, dual use solar that I think are going to provide an income opportunity and can and should be, I think, folded into creative drafting for easements in the future. Next slide. Part of that is then land planning. Most easements are divided up into a farming area, a farmstead area, and in some respects, a rural enterprise area, which can overlap with the farmstead area, as well as resource protection areas. And so, this is an area that I see probably gets the least amount of attention early on in the process by landowners, and it should get the most. I've come into a number of projects later on in the process where the land planning has already been somewhat set in stone. And in some cases, I don't think all of these questions were fully addressed in terms of the land planning that was done. Again, a lot of flexibility, particularly as operations expand and diversify, thinking about farm labor housing in a less traditional way than the traditional farmstead. We may have segregated farm labor housing that needs to be quite substantial in size, retirement housing for the retiring generation, and increasingly, there's going to be an interest and is a continuing interest in resource protection areas, wetlands, steep slopes, areas of older growth forest that may require special designation, and probably more significant prohibitions on the actual farming. Next slide. Again, as Jeff alluded, and we've always got to think about the taxes. The short answer with a sale of an easement, the bad news is that to the extent it's a low basis property, any of the gain above the original basis in the property, and many of these properties have a quite low basis, that's going to be capital gains. And really the only way to avoid that is to either make a donation of the easement or think about doing a 1031 like-kind exchange. Again, complex transaction that provides a mechanism to defer capital gains taxes. Again, with a donation, there's an income tax deduction. As Jeff said, gift and estate taxes are not that relevant, but the fact is in very large estates, the reduction in value that comes from placing a permanent conservation easement on a property will lower the value of the property and ultimately lower any potential for gift or estate taxes. Next slide. And of course, and then the larger farm transfer and estate planning context to sort of close the circle. Integration and coordination are important. These really need to be thought through in terms of how it's going to impact the overall plan, future owners, future plans for the property. Timing is important too. My rule of thumb with senior landowners is that fewer decision makers, particularly when it comes to conservation easements, is always better. So that if we've got an older couple and they're thinking about transferring the farm, I encourage/urge folks to think seriously about putting a conservation easement on the property before they get into transferring it. Because as you get more owners, it becomes much more difficult to negotiate and complete a conservation easement project. And then just overall clarity on the purpose, why is this being done, what the future impact is going to be, so that everyone understands the pros and and the restrictions that are being permanently placed on the property. Next slide. So Jeff alluded to this. I really have long thought that farmland protection, particularly the purchase programs, are a great catalyst for planning. There is nothing like the anticipation of a big check to really get people to focus on, geez, we got to think this through. And hopefully, they call somebody like Jeff and think about the easement and its impact and use it as a catalyst for planning. And the other thing that purchase programs provide are they help address some of the planning challenges. They generate cash. And again, many farmers, are traditionally land rich and cash poor. And this is a way to draw some cash out of the property without selling the property for non-farm use or cutting it up into smaller pieces, the death by 1,000 cuts approach, lopping off the road frontage. And so this is an alternative, can help address the fair versus equal, the age-old challenge between farming and non-farming heirs, or if there's going to be a non-family member taking over who wants to farm and parents want to provide a legacy. This is a way to to really, have your cake and eat it too, protect the farm, generate some cash, to help, satisfy some of the non-farm heirs, and also make the farm more affordable to the incoming farmer, whether it's a family member or a non-family member. Having a land that you're financing at agricultural value is going to result in a much lower mortgage payment than one that you purchased at full value, factoring in development pressure. In many farms, they use the proceeds to improve the farm's viability, reinvest it in the farm, create a new enterprise, build a new building. Longtime friend of mine who lives in the North Country, his son, they're selling development rights, and his son is going to be investing in a robotic milking system so that he can continue the dairy farm into the next generation. And of course, retiring generation quite often has not put away money for retirement. Everything's been plowed back in the farm. This is a way to generate some funds for retirement as well. Next slide. So there's some other conservation options for folks who maybe aren't necessarily a succession planning or transfer mode. Donating farms or ranches to nonprofits is a way to protect the farm and support nonprofit work. One of the vehicles for that, is an outright gift, a bequest. Popular approach is retaining life's use so that folks, the property passes when they die. Utilization of a charitable remainder trust, and as was mentioned on several occasions, the bargain sale. That's often a way to split the difference in many of these transactions. Next slide. So again, the goals are obviously, an easement will protect the farm, can generate income for retirement. If it's a donation, can be a way to avoid or reduce capital gains taxes, can reduce other transfer taxes if well planned, and in some instances, support conservation organizations. I think that's what I've got. Again, contact information. AFT's got a great website. We have our Farmland Information Center, the farmlandinfo.org site has about as much information on farmland protection, farmland conservation issues as you'll find anywhere. And certainly my email, I'm happy to sort of chat with folks, answer any questions, and want to quickly turn it over to my colleague, Jack, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes left at the end for some Q&A from folks, since I'm sure we haven't answered all the questions that are out there. So thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. Jack, you all set?
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jeff, Jeremy, Molly, for your orientations, Mary and Mary Ann for having me. Again, to reiterate, this work, these projects take a team. It takes a team-based approach to work through these things, and I'm happy to say the folks on this call are all part of that team. We're all part of a functioning network of practitioners who share in your success. And what I'd like to do with just a few minutes is walk through the materials that I submitted that should have been shared with you, just as a little bit of an orientation, and hopefully to highlight some of the concepts that we've gone over today in the various presentations. So I'm going to share my screen here. As a reminder for the introductions, my name is Jack Hornicle. I'm an attorney. I work now at Pace Law School. We have a legal clinic where students work on legal projects. And prior to that role, I worked at the Grow NYC green markets, providing free legal services to farmers that sold within the network of farmers markets in New York City. And my primary mission and work in that role was to help with farm succession projects, often involving conservation easements, and all of them involving a transfer of the primary obligations of the operation. And so the materials that I provided are just a handful of case studies of projects that I worked on in that role. And the basic way that they're formatted are as these small postcards that show the farmers and show their land and tell a bit of a narrative story on the front, and on the back tell a little more about their business and also the project statistics, how much time was spent working with the farmers from the nonprofit side, grant money that was spent, the list of legal and financial tools. And as you flip through them, you'll see that some familiar faces are listed there. Scalero firm for Jeff Fetter's work, and Jerry Cosgrove worked on most of these together with a lot of input from other practitioners from Farm Credit East, some other attorneys, other service providers that are, as we've been saying, well woven into this network. So just to flip through, we have a couple of families. Jerry referenced the conservation easement that was set up in order to create different management units so that the land as a whole was easier to work with and transfer over time. And that was with the Smiths, who are in Middletown. I'm going to come back to Lucky Dog Farm in Hamden in Delaware County to tell a little more of their story in detail. Catskill Merino Sheep Farm, there are some easements that were used in this project, some estate planning, and it's actually some innovative easement tools, purchase resale restrictions in the easement to make the farm affordable for the next generation. This project did involve an easement that we did not end up closing on because of the really the appraisal values and the transactional costs, and just not meeting the family's needs at the time. The senior generation had sufficient resources to retire. They did not need to unlock the capital from the land in order to retire on it. And the trust mechanism that we set up with Jeff Fetter gave the family sufficient security in the longevity of the farm, and the non-farming heirs enough security in their own inheritance to not need to look anywhere else for the money from the easement sale. This project was with a food-based business, so there's not much to say about the estate planning or the land. And finally, here's one that just shows another side of farm succession planning, where we really dealt very little, almost not at all, with estate planning or transfer of business interests or profits interests or anything. The missing piece was the successor, and we used the services of Farmland Finder and other farmer training networks to find someone who would come and work the farm. And they've started their own business, and they're using leases and contracts to take over use of the land. Really, it's a different operation, but they were able to set up their own operation using the assets of the existing farm, the real estate and the equipment, and taking over the market space. So less of a significant transfer of assets and long-term planning, short-term planning, but again, using this network of services and service providers to find the person and make sure that knowledge transfer that Jeff was talking about was sufficient, so the folks starting their new business could get situated in the right way. So just going back to Lucky Dog Farm to tell a little more of their story, the couple of things that I wanted to mention were really just to highlight the timeline of this project. Richard is the senior generation farmer on the left there, and Kaylin, the junior generation farmer. They are non-family. Kaylin had been working on the farm for at least, I guess, 13 years. Let me see, 12 or 13 years before they attended a workshop that was hosted by Grow NYC and featured Jerry to discuss farm succession. And back to Jeff's point about the junior generation really seeking ownership and confidence in their own role in the farm, I think those are decisive moments to bring two generations to a workshop and learn about a topic like this together, and to start having that conversation. So that began in 2015. I think at that point, Richard was well aware that his children didn't want to run the farm. They probably were as invested in its continuity as he is, but were not interested in taking it over themselves. One of the first things that we did with Richard was create an LLC in order to transfer the operation of the business to Kalen. And Richard had been running the farm as a sole proprietor for his career. Up to that point, it had been, I guess, 18 years running the farm just under his own name or with a DBA. So we created an LLC for the asset protection, and then also to use it as a model to transfer some of the interests of the business to Kalen, to bring Kalen into the business, really. And we used what Jeff described as profits interest. So Kalen, I believe it was over the 2019 season, effectively deferred some of his wages as an employee to contribute as capital into ownership of the business. And he also kicked in a couple pieces of equipment, so that beginning in 2020, when he was officially admitted as a partner in the LLC, he had already earned really like 10%, I think, of the company. So the company as a two-person business, Richard held 90 and Kalen held 10. And then they took a profit share of 50-50, so that each year they take an ownership draw, they pay each other what they need out of the business for their needs throughout the year. And at the end of the year, the profits are divided 50-50. And it's not contractually obligated, but the expectation is that Kalen's profits each year will buy out Richard's equity. And so over a course of 5 to 10 years, the farm itself will transfer the ownership, the profit of the farm will transfer ownership from Richard to Kalen. And we did that with the assistance of financial advisors from Farm Credit East that were invaluable to the process. It's beyond what I would be able to do, what Jeff would be able to do in setting up the capital accounts, making sure that it was related to the farm's books and accounting systems, so that the farmers felt comfortable submitting that information and understanding the process that they were about to engage in over the course of years, shifting this ownership from one to the other. And I didn't want to leap over the fact that in the early stages of this project, Richard decided to get divorced and began a divorce action. And I'm not a matrimonial lawyer. Jeff referred to some folks that work in his firm that are, but effectively that stopped, it didn't stop our conversations, but it stopped our process. The assets were effectively frozen for that time while the divorce played out. And luckily it was, from an asset perspective, it was fairly clear which spouse owned which pieces of land and which equipment. But all the same, once it was in front of a court, we were forbidden from moving anything. We were forbidden from capitalizing the LLC with the farm assets, and from really, making any long-term commitments. We continued to talk and meet and strategize, but we weren't able to really make many changes. So all of that process got us to January of 2020. We had discussed Richard's estate plan a few times here and there, but not settled on exactly what model we would want to use. And of course, then March and April of 2020 were a very strange time. And once it was clear that farming would continue and direct retail farmers markets would be open, Richard got back in touch and said, look, we really need to get my estate planning redone and make sure that it serves the interests of the farm and my family in the way that we've all been talking. So Richard has a sort of blended family, has 2 generations of children. The older generations are already off on their own with their own families and careers. The younger generation is in and around college. And so they have 2 very different sets of needs. So with Jeff's counsel and great expertise, we designed a revocable trust that would hold assets for the younger children until they had gone through college age. We set it at 25 years old. So they would be provided for until they were 25. And then after that point, anything in the estate would be divided equally. And throughout that timeline, Kalen, as the key employee who is a partial owner of the business, would have a special role over the farmland. and would be able to either purchase the farmland at an option price whenever he was available to or ready to do that, and also a right of first refusal if there was a third party making an offer on that property. Kalen would have the right to and timing to match it and buy the land. So at that point, when we had all the documents ready, this was just last year in spring, we got together at the farm and closed on the estate plan. I, of course, think, oh, great, we're done. Jeff says, no, this is like a machine. You need to tend to it. We'll see you all in another year. And as the cycle goes with agriculture, we're continuing to talk, and I've learned how the 2021 season went for them and what their intentions are for 2022, and the cycle continues. The last thing I wanted to mention about the estate plan that we designed, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but we did create a revocable trust for Richard as opposed to an irrevocable trust. And that was because there still is a mortgage on the property that I think has another 7 or 8 years until it's paid off. And the bank that holds the mortgage had changed throughout the timing that Richard had the mortgage. And he didn't feel confident that the mortgage would follow the land into the trust and to make a permanent decision like that. So we really kind of set up the structure for the estate, but it is not he hasn't taken that permanent step of giving away the land. It's still in Richard's name. It's just a series of decisions that will be made, and like Jeff said, it will avoid probate, it'll avoid the court process, and we've created the decision-making structure for what will happen with the estate. But because the mortgage still exists on the land, we haven't moved it. We didn't move the deed. We just set up this sort of decision tree of how things will go. And I suspect that as the farm continues, there'll be a moment where that is the appropriate thing to do. And thinking ahead, what are the big changes that we'll undergo at this farm in the coming years? One will be when the mortgage is paid off and the land is free and clear to move and transfer around. And another will be when Richard decides to stop attending market himself. Those are back-to-back 16-hour days. Many of those hours are in the truck, and that's not something that everyone wants to do for their whole lives. So there's a couple of big decision moments that'll come to this farm in the next handful of years that, as Jeff is saying, will affect the succession planning. We've gotten them most of the way there. We've had a lot of the challenging and difficult conversations, so we're ready to see them through till Kalen's ultimate ownership. So I'll stop there. I think we've got plenty of information in front of you all, and happy to take any questions or hear them for others, and appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you, Jack. And I want to thank all of you. That was a lot of information to absorb. So I want to give people an opportunity. If anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute yourself, and let's hear what you would like to get some clarity on, or you have a question about. I'm gonna, while you all are thinking about your questions, I'm gonna just share my screen for a minute. Hopefully I'll figure out the right one. One of the things we hear when it comes to, doing this kind of work is, what could it cost? And, that's really based on your particular situation. You do have this regional network that Molly mentioned, and, Jack pointed out in his presentation that it can be done in a way that is hopefully affordable and reasonable. Through our program, the Incubator Without Walls, for those participating tonight, we are going to offer $1,000 discount on the project costs. So we do ask our clients to provide a 25% share, whatever their project is. It could be succession planning, it could be something else. I picked $5,000 because we typically try to keep it in that range. And so if your project was $5,000, the client would owe $1,250. HVADC pays for the rest of that. By participating tonight, a $5,000 project, will only cost you $1,000. So we're giving you a $250 discount. We're going to eat the $1,000, or we're going to take care of that $1,000 of cost. Actually, we'll take care of all $5,000 of cost for our service providers. But I just wanted to point out here, you know, we're trying to be helpful and we're trying to make it affordable. We're trying to make sure that we can, you know, put families in the right position to move on for the next generation or the next successor of their land. And so we just want to make sure that everybody understands that. If anybody has any questions about that, I'm obviously happy to answer it. Or again, any other question you might have. You do have everyone's contact information. You should feel free to reach out. And we can, as I think everyone, Jeff, Jerry, Jack, Molly, we've all, and Jeremy pointed out, you know, we can put a team together to work on this. Obviously, you and your family are the integral part of the team, and it is a lot to think through.
Mary
Never
Ann,
too late to start. Never too late.
Mary Ann, this is Jerry. If I might jump in with a question for Jeff that I'm curious. I had a conversation recently, you know, with you know, a sort of a farm transfer situation where there was some hesitation from the senior generation of transferring the farm into a trust. And so one of the things that came up was whether to effectuate, you know, a transfer that might be viewed by the senior generation as simpler. You know, the option came up about possibly using, you know, a gift from the senior generation to the young farmer, where the senior generation would retain a life estate. I'm just curious whether, you know, you see that as sort of a simplified alternative in cases where there's reluctance for whatever reason to actually create a trust and transfer the land into the trust outright.
Got to unmute, Jeff, please.
There it is. My mute button disappeared. Jerry, you asked me a question, I get to ask you one. Okay. So yeah, that's one of the terms of a life estate used to be called a poor man's trust, because it still can do the same thing. I mean, I'm transferring a property to you, but I've retained a life estate in that property. So that is a way to do it, but the trust, kind of promoting trust, the trust can be built very flexible. So it can do things that you need to have done. The limitations on a life estate is that if for some reason I want to change my mind and sell the operation during lifetime, then the life estate has a value. And if I'm in a nursing home, the value is going to go to the nursing home. I use a trust that doesn't happen. The other thing about with a life estate is you run into the issues of, well, what happens if the person I transferred it to passes away? And maybe I've transferred it to a couple people. Is it going to their kids? It just has to be structured carefully, because the life estate doesn't give the remainderman, which is the person that takes over after I die, any authority during life. Because the life estate, the holder is in control, is responsible for the property too. I've just kind of made the paper put together almost like a payable on death account that I set up at a bank that says, if I die, Jerry, you get the account, but during my lifetime, you can't do anything with it. So with a life estate, it's the same way, that like a lender is hesitant in some cases to loan based on a life estate. So there are some limitations to it. That answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, my question to you?
Yeah.
Okay, and it comes up frequently. Let's look at Orange County. A conservation easement sounds great. It's It's going to provide some income, but I did this a number of years ago, and now the urban sprawl is getting closer to me. And I don't want to farm anymore, and I can't find somebody to take over the farming. One, can you get out of the conservation easement? And two, if I can't get out of the conservation easement, I am responsible for taxes without any ag exemptions, correct?
So the second question first, I mean, if the farm isn't being farmed at all, it wouldn't qualify for the ag exemption. So presumably then the tax rate would go up.
Yeah.
I think in terms of terminating the easement, I mean, again, this is, they're designed to be permanent. I mean, there is a termination provision. It's a pretty high bar, it's, sort of basically if agriculture becomes impossible, then arguably you could go to court and terminate it, recognizing that the owner of the land would only get the proceeds, they wouldn't get the value of the restriction. That would go to the holder of the easement. It would be, so there wouldn't be a windfall. The other thing I would say though, is that I do think that in many cases, and this will sort of play out over the next few decades, is that even smaller farms that are sort of being encroached upon, what often happens is the next farmer will change the operation and adapt to the surroundings and become more of a out-facing direct market farming operation. So, I do think that's one of the reasons to keep the terms flexible, so that if there is a way to farm it, it might be different than the existing, larger scale livestock operation or row crop operation. You transition it into a more of a direct market. But, so that's certainly one of the challenges. And I think hopefully in terms of selecting the farms, you get farms that have good soils and, the potential for diversification down the road.
Yeah.
Which would also then, if it's being farmed, would enable you to get the ag assessment and avoid the carrying costs at a higher rate than you otherwise would have.
We have seen situations where the ag exemption has been favorable to surrounding landowners because of the green space it's created. It can't be developed on, so developers around it will buy it at a pretty good price because nobody can build a new development next to where they are.
Yeah, and the reality is that some of these farms, if they have a residence on them, are going to retain significant value. I mean, even if they're not actively farmed, they could become a lifestyle farm. With, again, it's going to be a function of in most cases there is a residential building right or an existing residence and farmstead complex. So I don't think there's going to be no ability to sell the property. Obviously, the hope would be that it would be sold for active agriculture, and that's going to play out, and hopefully there'll be creative new operators who can adapt to the changing surroundings and find a sort of a market that's going to be more compatible with more neighbors. Turn the neighbors into a market advantage as opposed to a sort of a downside or people who are going to be complaining about farming. So.
Well, that was a very interesting conversation, you two. You guys must be real fun around the lunch table.
No, we're right.
All right. Well, I do want to respect everyone's time. It's a little after 8 now. And I want to thank our participants, Greg, Terry, Diana, or at least Diana's iPhone, and Joe. Last chance. Any questions that anyone wants to throw out there?
Hi, I'm Diana.
Hi, Diana.
Hi. I just wanted to thank everybody. I am a third generation farmer. Hopefully we have a fourth generation interested. But I have so many things to think about after hearing you all. We also have like a historical value to our farm. It's a 200-year-old farm. So I would definitely like to speak to somebody about it more, where we could, keep the farm as it is and continue farming. But that's just a little bit about our background. But we will definitely reach out to you, and a lot of this information is very helpful.
Great, thank you, Diana. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. You're welcome to start with Avalon. I know she had been emailing you, and she can certainly, help direct you to the right person, okay?
Yeah, it was actually my daughter. My daughter actually did that. She's
Ah.
spearheaded it, but she isn't here at the moment. So I definitely wanted to get in on it and see.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, we just wanted to thank you for the time that you put into this. This was very, very helpful for us planning for the future. A lot of good information, and we just appreciate that you did this. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And again, I'm pretty sure everyone on this call would be happy to help in any way we could. All right. Greg or Terry, would you like to say anything before we sign off for the evening? Oh, hi, Greg.
Hi. No, thank you. It's, a good resources here. I was actually picked up on some of the stuff very in the beginning there with the farmers looking for land sort of thing. That's one reason I wanted to listen in today. I am in the town of Warwick. I'm on the muck land though, so it's a little different. Plus, my family has kind of gone through the transition already here, but I see a lot of preserved farms that kind of aren't being farmed, and maybe it's like a lifestyle farm, right? It's the person's in the house, but I worry that what's going to happen with those preserved farms, and or there is an operating farm and they sold it for preservation rights, but they even still run out of money 20, 30, 40 years later. And I think that's a concern at some point. So maybe there is young farmers out there that are looking for land, and that's actually a really good resource. That's where I picked up the most. But all good stuff for anyone that was listening in. So thank you.
Great. How are you related? Are you related to Leonard?
Yeah, that's my dad.
Your dad? Well, please tell him I said hello.
All right.
Yeah, me as well. I've spent many years ago, but a lot of time with Leonard and at town meetings in Warwick.
Yeah, he was kind of the spearhead of it all. Or I mean, him and oh gosh, what was his name? Seymour Gordon. Yeah, from.
Oh yeah, you're going way back. Yeah.
We can go to the tractor dealership. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Last call. This is going to be last call. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you everyone for participating. Special thank you to my speakers. And I'm sure we will all be in touch. Molly asked if we could circulate the handouts that everyone has sent in to all the other speakers. We're happy to do that. We'll make sure that gets done. Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Stay
Take
warm.
care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.